Imagine you're running a business in the late 1950s. A customer signs an important contract. Your accountant needs a copy. Your legal department needs another. Your sales office needs one too. Today, you'd press one button. Back then, making copies was slow, messy, expensive, and surprisingly difficult. Some offices relied on carbon paper. Others used mimeograph machines. Large organizations hired dedicated typing pools simply to recreate documents by hand. Every additional copy meant more time, more labor, and more cost. Businesses weren't struggling because they lacked information. They were struggling because they couldn't duplicate it efficiently. Then, one invention changed offices forever. It wasn't a computer. It wasn't the internet. It wasn't email. It was a machine that could copy ordinary paper quickly, reliably, and repeatedly. That invention transformed paperwork from one of the biggest bottlenecks in business into something people barely had to think about. The company behind it was Xerox. What started as a small business called Haloid became the company that would completely redefine how offices worked across the world. Its revolutionary technology, known as xerography, used electricity and light to create dry copies on ordinary paper instead of relying on messy chemicals or special coated sheets. For the first time, businesses could make high-quality copies quickly using plain paper, dramatically changing office productivity. In 1959, Xerox introduced the Xerox 914. It wasn't simply another office machine. It became one of the most successful business products ever created. For many companies, the Xerox machine quickly became the center of the office. Contracts, invoices, engineering drawings, medical records, legal documents, government paperwork, everything flowed through it. Demand exploded. Businesses rented the machines faster than Xerox could manufacture them. Revenue surged, profits soared. Within just a few years, Xerox had become one of America's fastest-growing companies. The company's success became so complete that people stopped saying, "Make a photocopy." Instead, they simply said, "Xerox it." Few companies ever become so dominant that their brand name turns into a verb. Xerox did. By the late 1960s, it wasn't just selling copiers. It had built one of the most profitable business systems in corporate history. Protected by patents, trusted by the world's largest organizations, and generating extraordinary recurring income from every machine it placed inside an office. To many people, the copier business looked finished. Xerox had already won. But hidden on the other side of the world, a Japanese company was studying the market very differently. It wasn't trying to build a better Xerox. It was trying to build a completely different future. Its name was Canon. To understand how Canon eventually challenged Xerox, we first need to understand something far more important. Xerox wasn't simply selling copiers. It had built an economic machine that generated money long after each copier left the factory. Most people assumed businesses bought Xerox machines outright. Many didn't. They leased them. Instead of paying the full price on day one, customers made regular payments over many years. That created a steady stream of predictable revenue. But the lease wasn't where the real money was made. Every time someone pressed the copy button, Xerox earned again. Many contracts included a charge based on the number of copies produced. The more a customer relied on the machine, the more valuable that customer became. Then came another source of income: consumables, toner, developer, replacement drums, special parts. As offices produced millions of copies, those components had to be replaced continuously. And because Xerox designed the machines, businesses depended on Xerox to keep them operating. Service became another pillar of the business. When a copier stopped working, a trained Xerox technician arrived. Repairs, calibration, preventive maintenance. Later generations also received software and system updates. Everything was handled through Xerox's nationwide service organization. Thousands of technicians traveled between customer sites every day. Keeping machines running wasn't simply customer support. It protected Xerox's recurring revenue. The longer a machine remained in service, the longer the customer continued paying. By the late 1960s, Xerox wasn't selling equipment. It was operating one of the world's most successful recurring revenue systems. Each installed copier became a long-term income-producing asset. The company didn't need customers to keep buying new machines every month. It needed them to keep copying. And businesses did exactly that. The more paperwork companies created, the stronger Xerox became. As offices expanded, copy volumes increased. As copy volumes increased, revenue increased. As revenue increased, Xerox invested in larger, faster, more sophisticated machines. The system reinforced itself. It looked almost impossible to disrupt. Then, Xerox added another powerful advantage: patents. Its zero-graphic technology was protected by an enormous portfolio of intellectual property. Competitors couldn't simply copy the machine. If they wanted to challenge Xerox, they would have to invent a different path. For years, that patent wall gave Xerox valuable time. Customers trusted the brand. Technicians maintained the machines. Sales teams built deep relationships with the world's largest organizations. Everything appeared to favor Xerox. By the late 1960s, most companies were trying to figure out how to compete with Xerox. Canon asked a completely different question. What if the future didn't belong to bigger copiers, but to smaller ones? To understand why that question mattered, we need to look at how offices actually worked. Large Xerox machines were incredibly powerful, but they were also expensive. Many occupied an entire room. Departments often shared a single copier. When an employee needed a document copied, they walked to the copier room, waited in line, made the copies, then returned to their desk. For large corporations, that system worked well. But not every customer was a multinational company. Small businesses, doctors, architects, local government offices, schools, and individual departments inside larger organizations often didn't need an enormous industrial copier. They wanted something much simpler, smaller, more affordable, easy to operate, easy to maintain. Xerox didn't ignore those customers because it lacked technology. It ignored them because its business model had been built around large, high-volume enterprise machines. From Xerox's perspective, smaller copiers generated fewer copies, less service revenue, and lower long-term profitability. Canon saw the same market very differently. Instead of asking, "How do we build a better Xerox?" Canon asked, "How do we build a copier for people who don't want a Xerox?" That changed everything. Rather than competing head-on, Canon searched for spaces where Xerox wasn't fully focused. The company invested heavily in miniaturization, compact engineering, manufacturing efficiency, and reliability. Then Canon tackled another problem: maintenance. Traditional copiers often required trained technicians for servicing. Downtime meant frustration. Service visits meant cost. Canon's engineers believed many routine maintenance tasks could be simplified. Their solution eventually became one of the most influential ideas in office equipment: the disposable cartridge. Instead of replacing individual internal components, the toner, drum, and several key imaging parts could be replaced together as a single unit. Maintenance became dramatically simpler. Downtime became shorter. Businesses became less dependent on technician visits. The technology wasn't just clever engineering. It completely changed the economics of owning a copier. Xerox continued perfecting the world's best enterprise copier. Canon quietly began reinventing what a copier could be. The battle wasn't becoming bigger versus smaller. It was becoming two completely different philosophies of doing business, and neither company realized the office itself was about to change. By the 1980s, the battle between Xerox and Canon was no longer about copying documents. It had become a battle between two completely different business systems. From the outside, both companies sold copiers. Inside, almost everything was different. Xerox believed businesses would continue relying on powerful central copying rooms. Its machines were designed for enormous monthly workloads. Large corporations, banks, insurance companies, government departments, universities, any organization producing millions of copies every year. Canon believed the future would be much more distributed. Instead of one giant copier serving an entire building, smaller copiers would sit inside individual departments, closer to employees, closer to where work actually happened. That difference changed everything: product design, manufacturing, sales, service, even profitability. Xerox invested heavily in highly sophisticated machines packed with advanced engineering. Canon invested heavily in designing products that were easier to manufacture, easier to install, and easier for customers to maintain themselves. Xerox's business became increasingly dependent on service technicians. Canon worked to reduce the need for service calls altogether. Xerox measured success by keeping high-volume enterprise machines operating continuously. Canon measured success by putting more machines into more offices. The companies weren't simply selling different products, they were solving different customer problems. Then another major shift arrived: the personal computer. As computers became common inside offices, employees no longer shared information the same way. Instead of creating one master document, businesses were printing documents from individual desks. Departments wanted printers, smaller copiers, multifunction devices, not simply one giant machine hidden in another room. The office itself was changing. Canon adapted naturally because its strategy had already been moving in that direction. Xerox adapted too, but adapting became harder when an entire business had been built around a different model. The company's factories, sales teams, service organization, and revenue model had all evolved around centralized enterprise copying. Changing one product was easy. Changing an entire operating system was not. Meanwhile, Canon wasn't just selling more copiers, it was expanding into laser printers, digital imaging, cameras, semiconductor manufacturing equipment, medical imaging, and professional optics. Every new business strengthened the company's manufacturing capability. Knowledge developed in one division often improved another. The company became more diversified, more resilient, less dependent on any single product. Xerox remained one of the world's most respected technology companies, but Canon had quietly built something equally powerful: a business designed for where the market was going, not where it had been. By the late 1980s, Canon was no longer the challenger. It had become one of the companies defining the future of office technology. Its strategy was beginning to pay off. Businesses no longer wanted separate machines for every task. They wanted integrated office solutions: print, copy, scan, and later, digital document management. Canon had already been building products that were smaller, more modular, and easier to manufacture. That experience made the transition into digital office equipment far smoother. At the same time, another market exploded: laser printers. As personal computers spread into offices around the world, every desk suddenly needed a way to print documents. Canon saw an opportunity. Instead of treating printers as a completely different business, it used many of the same technologies it had already developed for copiers. The company supplied laser printing engines to several manufacturers, most famously Hewlett-Packard. HP designed the overall printer. Canon supplied the engine that actually printed the page. Together, they helped define the modern office printer. Every new printer sold expanded Canon's manufacturing scale. Higher production volumes reduced costs. Lower costs made future products even more competitive. The advantages reinforced themselves. Meanwhile, Xerox remained focused on defending its traditional strengths. Its enterprise customers still trusted the company. Its technology was still respected. Its engineers continued producing outstanding machines. But the center of gravity in the office had shifted. Copying was no longer the only priority. Printing, digital workflows, networked offices, and multifunction devices were becoming equally important. Canon had positioned itself across all of those markets. Xerox now faced competition on multiple fronts, not just from Canon, but from Ricoh, Sharp, Konica Minolta, Kyocera, and other Japanese manufacturers that had adopted similar principles of efficient manufacturing and continuous product improvement. The market Xerox had once dominated almost alone had become intensely competitive. Margins narrowed. Customers gained more choice. Price became more important. Innovation cycles became faster. The advantages Xerox once enjoyed were no longer enough to guarantee leadership. The company was still successful, still respected, still profitable, but something fundamental had changed. For the first time in decades, Xerox was reacting to the market instead of defining it. The empire that had once shaped the future of office technology was now trying to keep up with it. As competition intensified, Xerox faced another challenge, one that had nothing to do with copiers. Technology itself was changing. Businesses were becoming digital. Computers were replacing typewriters. Networks were connecting offices. Information was beginning to move electronically instead of only on paper. Years earlier, Xerox had already recognized that computers would become increasingly important. In 1970, the company created one of the most influential research laboratories in history, Xerox PARC, the Palo Alto Research Center. Its mission wasn't to build better copiers, it was to imagine the future of computing. Inside PARC, researchers developed technologies decades ahead of their time: the graphical user interface, windows, icons, menus, the computer mouse, Ethernet networking, object-oriented programming, laser printing. Many ideas that later became standard across the computer industry were either invented or significantly advanced inside Xerox PARC. Looking back, it's easy to ask, if Xerox had all of this technology, why didn't it dominate personal computing? The answer is far more complicated. Inventing technology and building a successful business around it are completely different challenges. Xerox remained focused on the office. Its customers bought document systems, printing equipment, enterprise solutions, not personal computers. Many PARC innovations required entirely different manufacturing capabilities, different distribution channels, different software ecosystems, different customer support, and completely different business models. Commercializing those technologies would have required Xerox to compete with companies it had never competed with before, companies like Apple, IBM, Microsoft. Instead, Xerox continued investing primarily in the markets it already understood: office technology, document management, printing, and enterprise services. Meanwhile, others recognized the broader potential. Apple engineers famously visited PARC and saw concepts that would later influence the Macintosh. Microsoft would eventually bring graphical interfaces to hundreds of millions of computers. Networking became the foundation of the Internet age. Laser printing became a global industry. Many PARC ideas changed the world, just not always through Xerox. At the same time, the copier business itself became increasingly competitive. Digital technology accelerated product development. Margins continued shrinking. The extraordinary profitability Xerox had enjoyed for decades became much harder to maintain. Then, the company faced problems from within: accounting issues, restructuring, leadership changes, investor pressure. The business that once defined office copying was now fighting battles on multiple fronts. Xerox hadn't stopped innovating. The world had simply become much larger than the market Xerox had originally built.
Today, both Xerox and Canon still exist, but they are no longer equals. One became smaller, the other became stronger. Xerox never disappeared. It continued transforming itself through restructuring, cost reductions, new leadership, business services, managed print services, and enterprise document solutions. It remained an important company, but it never recovered the extraordinary dominance it once enjoyed. The business that had practically invented the modern office copier had become one competitor among many. Canon's journey looked very different. The company continued expanding far beyond copiers. Professional cameras, mirrorless cameras, cinema equipment, medical imaging, industrial inspection systems, semiconductor lithography equipment, commercial printing, network cameras, office solutions. Each new business strengthened the next. Manufacturing expertise developed for one product improved another. Optical technology built for cameras supported medical imaging. Precision engineering improved industrial equipment. Canon created an ecosystem, not a single product company. Looking back, it's tempting to say Canon won because it built better machines. That isn't the real lesson. Xerox built extraordinary machines, some of the finest office equipment ever produced. The difference was much deeper. Xerox optimized one incredibly successful business system. Canon continuously built capabilities that could be reused across many industries. As offices evolved, Canon adapted. As technology changed, Canon diversified. As competition increased, Canon already had multiple engines of growth. Xerox remained closely tied to the economics that had made it successful decades earlier. That strategy produced enormous profits until the market itself changed. This is why Xerox's story still matters today, because collapse doesn't always mean bankruptcy. Sometimes it means losing the position you once believed nobody could ever take away. Xerox taught the world how to copy information. Canon taught the world how quickly industries can change. One company invented an empire. The other quietly redesigned the battlefield. And when the battle was over, the market hadn't simply chosen a better copier. It had chosen a better system.
That is the difference between protecting today's success and building for tomorrow's world.